Are your feet ready to run? On this week's episode of the Exercises Health Podcast, we're going to discuss some steps you can take to prepare your feet for your next run or your first run. We are going to cue our introduction and then dive right into this conversation. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health Podcast, brought to you by Exercise for Life Studios and Muscle Activation Schaumburg, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset. And the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared toward building the health and function of your muscles. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie.
And today we are diving into the feet if you are a runner. If you are interested in starting up running, you're maybe going to do a Couch to 5K program, or you are already running, you are looking to hit your first half marathon or whatever it is, whatever fall event you have coming up or event any time of the year, your feet need to be prepared to run. And prepared as in starting to run, as well as prepared as in terms of recovering from your run and getting ready for your next run. So what we are going to discuss today is going to cover all of that, because this process is focused on the one thing that actually matters when it comes to preparing your feet to run, and that is your muscles.
That's right. You know, something interesting about running, that it is what it is, and most people don't even recognize this, but it's like you're about to go do an exercise times 10,000, right?
It's true. That's a
because
great point.
After you
10,000 reps.
I know, 10,000 reps. Like when's the last time you went to the gym? You're like, I'm going to do 10,000 squats. No, it's like, I'm doing 10 squats or 20 squats. It's not 10,000 squats. But like if you ever wore a step tracker and you go for a run, I mean, you're racking up 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 steps. And so that's a lot of repetitions of your foot hitting the ground. And there are very specific things that you can do and should do to prepare your feet for really this pretty intense event for your feet. And it's really an area that no one really thinks about, except for supportive shoes. And if you have foot pain, then you think about that. But these are things to help strengthen the thing that is supposed to support your feet, which is your muscles. And is often an area that people are strongly compensating around. I mean, severely compensating around. It's an area that we work on all the time with MAT, muscle activation techniques, because of all the inhibition that's in the feet. And this hopefully will help push you in the right direction in terms of getting a jump start on strengthening the feet before you're running.
Absolutely, Julie. That's a great point you bring up, where the strength of the feet is rarely ever considered. Like, we consider trying to dull the sensation of the feet. We consider trying to dull the sensory input to the feet, stomping on a lacrosse ball and, rubbing it back and forth and whatever, and trying to, disrupt everything that we're feeling with the feet, disrupt the function of the feet, require less strength and function from our feet, by the shoes we're wearing and the insoles and everything like that. But we rarely ever stop to say, hey, these things that we are using to do 10,000 plus reps on every single day, maybe we should actually take some time to strengthen them. Maybe we should actually make sure that they are functioning well, that we are not just dulling everything about them, and then, we won't have to pay attention to them at all. So what we are going to lay out today is a plan that you can follow to increase the function, to increase the strength of the muscles of your feet. Because here's the thing, the better your muscles function and the stronger your muscles are, the better supported the joints of your feet are going to be, the more mobile and appropriately mobile the joints of your feet are going to be, the better supported all the other tissues of your feet, like your fascia, your plantar fascia, and everything else within your feet will be. So if you are noticing that, you're having symptoms or something's going on with your feet that's either preventing you from running, or you notice it during your runs or after your runs, with the joints of your feet, with your plantar fascia, with really anything else with going on with your feet, that to us is a telltale sign that there is something going on with the strength and function of your muscles. And by improving the function and improving the strength of the muscles that control the feet, so often what we have seen in over nearly a decade and a half of experience is that clears up either mostly or completely everything else that is subjectively going on with the feet from a symptom perspective. So what we're going to lay out for you today is the plan that we follow with a lot of our clients, that we recommend to a lot of our clients, and that you can start implementing to do just that.
That's right. Now, Charlie, you're talking about the strength of the feet and making, strongest feet are going to be best prepared for doing, thousands of reps on them. But you know what? I think a lot of our listeners have been exposed to this idea that in other joints, like your hips, they should be strong, and that's how they stay healthy. Your knees, they should be strong, and that's how they stay healthy. But you know what? If you're listening to this now, if you're listening to this podcast, you are like one of the first people really in the world to know that your feet are just like all your other joints. There is a handful of joints in your feet that are controlled by a handful of muscles. And oftentimes when we feel like, oh my gosh, my feet are failing or they're not doing well, we think about adding supports, which in the other areas of the body would be like having an elbow brace or a knee brace or wrapping your hip. But we know that when we get the muscles strong, the joints do better. So, right, if you're having symptoms, if you're not having symptoms, this is great to do. But also if you're having symptoms, like Charlie said, in your plantar fascia, you might have heard that as plantar fasciitis, which is inflammation in the fascia under your foot. Other structures might be getting stressed, like your first met might have a protrusion, which would be like a bunion that might get inflamed when you're running, or your toes might be feeling funky, or you might have like a neural issue where you're feeling like your feet get kind of nervy. I have experience with someone with Morton's neuroma. You might feel that underneath your foot somewhere. So all of these symptoms are signs that, hey, force is going through your foot kind of weird, and the stronger that we can get your foot, the better it's going to be, so that you're more equipped to handle this type of challenge when you're running.
Exactly. And like we said, this all comes back to your muscles. And then one thing we brought up on this podcast in the past that is relevant right now is the number of muscles that are designed to help control your feet. For each foot, you have 50 muscles that are designed to control your feet, that are designed to move your feet, that are designed to keep your feet stable, that are designed to make sure your feet are strong and are able to function the way they need to function, are able to propel you forward and everything like that, okay? 50 muscles for each feet. 100 muscles total is nearly 20% of your body's skeletal muscles are targeted, are used for your feet, okay? Now here's the thing. Not only are they designed to keep your feet strong and keep your feet functioning well, but as I brought up earlier, there is this relationship between when your feet need to be mobile and when your feet need to be very stable, because they need to be able to be both. They have to be able to move well, and they also have to be very rigid at times in order for you to be able to effectively propel yourself forward when you're kind of when you're walking, but more so when you're running and you're doing anything that, you know, requires more effort, more force, everything like that. And so, again, it's the muscles that are dictating this timing relationship between when your foot is supposed to be mobile and when your foot is supposed to be stable. And if the function and strength of your muscles is not there, then what we see so often is your foot is not able to move in the ways that it's supposed to move. So it's not able to be mobile when it's supposed to be mobile. And on the flip side, it's also not able to be stable when it's supposed to be stable. So it doesn't do a good job moving, and it doesn't do a good job being this kind of stable platform that you get to push yourself forward off of, all right? And as a result, foot issues start to develop. As a result, knee issues start to develop. As a result, hip issues, low back issues, all the way up to the neck issues start to develop, okay? And so what we see time and time again, by getting the muscles of the feet stronger, by getting the muscles of the feet functioning better, so many of the things that people blame on, you know, whether it's age or, you know, joint wear and tear or, you know, overuse of this, that, or the other, it all really starts to go away in a sense, symptomatically, because the function of the feet improves, which allows the stress that the rest of the body is having to take on to go way, way down, all right? And so getting your feet prepared for running, yes, it helps the feet, absolutely, but also is gonna help the rest of your body do better with your running as well. So how do we go about doing this?
That's right. And in the end, it's all about strengthening the muscles. Because remember, just like what Charlie said, is the muscles that allow, it's like an exclusive muscle function. Like you can't get this from an orthotic or from a support. Your foot needs to be mobile when it needs to be mobile, and it needs to be stiff or stable, like not moving, when it needs to be stiff or stable. And a lot of times an orthotic will try to compensate for whichever one you're not good at. but you need to be really good at both. So the first thing that we suggest to all of our clients, our foot clients, our running clients, people that want to start running, or even walking clients, is to get MAT. Here's the thing, because of the wear and tear that our feet get, they're always a stressed area, because that's how humans get around. We walk around on our feet. And so there's just a lot of steps. Whether you think you're really active or you think you're really not active, you're still using your feet a lot. And so what muscle activation techniques does is it finds the muscles that are underworking, causing other muscles to overwork. And so when we balance out this difference, then the body feels so much more relaxed, more mobile, and more supported, which is, when we think about running, we're thinking about support. But also, we want that mobility, right? So when we're starting out with someone, we're looking through the muscle activation technique system, looking at what muscles are not available to be used when you're exercising, and we try to get those ones on board so that your body has the most muscles available when you're trying to exercise on your feet and the rest of your joints.
Absolutely. MAT as a first step is critical to making sure that what we lay out next is actually going to be effective and really help strengthen your feet. But what a lot of people don't realize about muscle activation techniques is there's actually different variations or different ways of doing MAT. It's all developed, under Greg Roscoff's system, but there's like traditional MAT, and then we are also certified in MAT RX, which is a very specific process that gets people's feet really strong and functioning really, really, really well, and the work holds for a really long time with this MAT RX process, especially for the feet, okay? And then there's an MAT RX process that uses a specialty stim machine that we are certified here at Muscle Activation Schaumburg to use. And we can use that with people's feet with the MAT RX process. And so we see that when people are having different foot issues going on, we see that, okay, we're able to get their muscles responding well with MAT. We're able to do some, deeper work with MAT RX. And we go to the MAT RX stim version. It doesn't require like the poking and the pushing that a lot of people are accustomed to with MAT. So some people find that uncomfortable with the poking and pushing. There's none of that, but we're able to get things even at a deeper level from a contraction strength function standpoint. And so I just want to share that so you can understand that at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, like, we take people's feet very seriously, and making sure that your feet are functioning well, your feet are strong, and because of how impactful we have seen the feet to be for people's bodies. And so because of that, we have a lot of different tools and a lot of different processes that we can follow all under the MAT umbrella to make sure that the strength and function of your feet is as high as it can be.
That's right. So after you get MAT in your feet, things are functioning better, things are most definitely feeling better. Now it's time to build the conditioning, right? So when we think about muscles, we want to first make sure that they're connected and available. That's what MAT does. We have all the 50 muscles of the feet available, ready to be used. But the second part is where you strengthen them and you actually get them conditioned. It's almost like, I know feet are weird to think about, but if you think about like maybe your bicep muscle, you want to make sure, number one, your brain can squeeze it. And then number two, then you go exercise it to make it stronger. That's what we're going to do in the feet. We're making them available, then we're going to exercise them to make them stronger and more resilient and with more endurance and all that good stuff. So the next thing to know is that there are 6 different motions that we recommend that you practice and strengthen in your feet. And this goes beyond the calf raises because, again, there's many joints in the foot and 50 muscles that accompany those. So we have to make sure that we are strengthening all the muscles and not just 1,000 million calf raises, although calf raises are important. So the first 2 motions, we'll like pair them so they're easy to remember. So the first 2 motions is going to be pointing your feet down and pointing your feet up. So you can do this in a whole bunch of ways. So if you were seated, like if you're sitting right now, you can kind of point your foot down almost like you're being a ballerina, and then you can point your toe up, pulling your toes towards your knees. So that's going to work the back of the shin, like your calf area, and then you'll also feel it on the front area, which is the front of your shin. You can also do this seated. So if you have your feet touching the ground, then it would almost look like a calf raise, and then you'd leave your heels on the ground and lift your toes. Lastly, you could also do this motion standing. So that would be the most intense version because you have your body weight on it. So you would do like a calf raise standing, and then you can also lift up on your heels. If that one's pretty hard to do with 2 feet, a lot of times I'll have my clients put all their weight on 1 foot and do this toe raise on the unweighted foot while you're standing, and do one side at a time. You can also add weights to this. So if you wanted to hold dumbbells and do this, so that's the first motion, which is the first two motions, right? So you're thinking of like that forward back motion. So it's the calf raising motion or pointing your toes down motion, and then lifting your toes up to work the front of the shin.
Absolutely. And the way we want to recommend kind of progressing through these motions from like a challenge perspective is first, just practice the motion in general. So practice pointing your foot up, practice pointing your foot down, up, down, so you can kind of feel how the foot is moving when you're doing that, okay? Then you're going to start doing some isometric exercises for each respective motion. So you would point your foot up, and then you just kind of hold and squeeze, and then you point your foot down, and you'd hold and squeeze, okay? And you would practice, going through your motion, but adding in a hold and squeeze. And then you would start to add more external resistance, more load with that, okay? So whether it's a calf raise standing, or a calf raise holding dumbbells, or, an ant-tib raise, or whatever it is, right? So you would do the same motion, but you would be adding more external load. So that's kind of the progression for each of these motions. First, just practice doing the motion. Then do the motion, add a squeeze at the end. It doesn't have to be a long squeeze, and it doesn't have to be an intense squeeze. You can play around with that. And then you do the motion while adding more external loads, so you're having to squeeze more intensely the entire time, okay? So just kind of keeping that in mind as you're going through these 6 key motions. So like Judy said, the first 2 key motions, pointing the foot down, pointing the foot up. The next 2 key motions are spinning the foot in and spinning the foot out, okay? And what we want you to think about with each of these is, again, just first of all, just kind of perform that motion of spin the foot in, spin the foot out, spin the foot in, spin the foot out. Just feel how your foot is moving with this, okay? Then you're going to spin the foot in, and you're going to focus on giving a little bit of a squeeze after you spin the foot in. Now, a lot of times, the muscles that you're going to feel squeezing are ones that are kind of like deep to your calves, all right? It might even go a little bit into the arches of your feet. And so kind of trying to make that mind-muscle connection there, and giving a little bit of a squeeze at the end of that motion. And then when you spin your foot out, you're likely going to feel the muscles that are more along the outer part of your lower leg, kind of like the outside of your calf, maybe even wrapping a little bit around to the front side of the lower leg. And so again, just kind of giving a squeeze in those muscles there. And then you go and add a little bit of resistance or load or whatever to it, whether it's using a band or a TheraBand or whatever it is. But just kind of practicing those motions, spin in, spin in with some squeeze, spin out with some squeeze, and then kind of squeezing the whole time you're spinning in, squeezing the whole time you're spinning out. And that would be, again, the progression for this second set of 2 key motions.
Now the third set, which will be our 5th and 6th exercise, is going to focus on the toes. The toes are such a critical area, although you think like that little tiny toe, yes, it's so important in your foot mechanics. So the next 2 is going to be bending your toes. So you can think about like crunching your toes up into a ball, and then extending them. You can even lift them if you're able to. So that's the 5th and 6th motion. So you're thinking about curling your toes under, and then lifting and straightening. So if we follow our progression, first you're gonna sit or stand or lay or whatever, and just do the motion, right? Don't have any resistance, don't do any holds, just bend the toes under and extend, straighten the toes up. And then the next would be to do it with a isometric squeeze. So you're holding and squeezing. So you'd like bend the toes and hold for 3 or so seconds, and then extend and hold. And then the last one is to be doing it with resistance. So whether that means that you're standing on your feet and you curl your toes just against your own body weight. You could stand on a towel, like a very common physical therapy one is like you stand on a towel and you kind of crunch the towel under your toes. You could be lifting your toes. If you need a little bit more resistance, you could sit and put a band around your toes and extend them. So you can be creative with it. But the 5th and 6th exercise is going to be the toes. So to wrap this up, we're thinking the entire foot is pointing down. The entire foot is pointing up. The 3rd and 4th exercise is going to be rotating in, spinning in with your feet, spinning out with your feet. You can almost think about like if you were sitting, the bottoms of your feet looking at each other, and then the bottoms of your feet looking away from each other. And then the last being the toe bend and the toe extension. Now, step 2, right, is something you can start doing right now. Maybe as we were talking about it, you were like kind of playing with it. If you noticed while you were doing this a difficulty connecting with muscle squeeze, pain, or cramping, those are like very telltale signs like, hey, you need to go way back to step number 1 and get that MAT done. A lot of people will skip it only because we know there's not an MAT specialist in every city, but we really encourage you to go find your local MAT specialist, reach out to us. We're really close in the Chicagoland area. But those are really telltale signs that you have muscle inhibition, that when you start doing step 2 without step 1, you're going to be reinforcing compensation. Because when you do exercise, you use the muscles that are already available. You get them stronger, that's for sure. But we want to make sure that we're strengthening everything and we're not reinforcing compensation. So if you notice any of those symptoms, well, in addition, if there was tightness or a difference in motion, meaning like I couldn't even do that motion, or the right side could do it and the left side couldn't, those are also really good signs like, hey, you got to get back to making sure that you are eliminating that muscle inhibition and that more and more muscles are available for your feet to use.
Yeah, another big reason why it's super important to be starting with MAT and not just jumping to step number 2 is because there are a lot of motions of the feet that are very hard for you to consciously be able to control. For example, like there are parts of your feet that are supposed to be able to like point down and spin out and, you know, point up and spin in and everything like that. And it's very difficult to kind of isolate motion just around those parts of the feet and try to do exercises just for those parts of the feet. But with muscle activation techniques, because you have a practitioner who is doing it to you, it's much easier to get motion just around the specific parts of your foot that are, you know, involved with the group of muscles that you're working with, and make sure that the motion in that part of the foot is exactly how it is supposed to be, and the muscle function in that part of the foot is exactly how it is supposed to be. So we give you these 6 key motions because these are very easy to visualize. Point down, point up, spin in, spin out, bend the toes, straighten the toes. But understand that there's actually a lot more complexities of the feet that are able to get improved and flushed out with muscle activation techniques. And so starting with MAT, not only make sure that when you go to step 2 and you're doing the exercises that you're able to use the right muscles, that you're not just creating greater compensations, but it will also help to clean up issues around other parts of the feet that it's really difficult to try to do specific exercises for.
So when you're thinking about preparing your feet for running, we're thinking about strengthening the muscles. Our goal here at Muscle Activation Schaumburg is to make sure that all 50 muscles, all 100 muscles of your 2 feet are ready and prepared to handle force, to handle walking, to handle running. And so when you're thinking about preparing your feet for running, we want you to first think about the strength and function of the muscles. To do this, number 1, make sure you get regular MAT for your feet. And number 2, make sure that you're regularly strengthening your feet to build up the conditioning, not only in the running motions, but all the other motions of the feet, because we know that when your feet are as strong as possible and as functional as possible, it really helps your running, and it makes it so that you can be running faster and stronger and for as long as you possibly can.
So if you want to experience muscle activation techniques for yourself, get your feet assessed and get your foot muscles worked on, strengthened, have their function improved, and you are in the Chicagoland area or willing to travel to the Chicagoland area, all you have to do to get on our schedule is go to www.matschaumburg.com and click the big green button that says Get Started. You'll be able to see our availability and schedule yourself for your initial consultation and assessment. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is getting back into running or has been running and they are wanting to make sure that their body is ready to go? They're not going to be risking injury by starting this new activity or by trying to push farther than their body has gone before. And they know that their feet are going to be a big part of this. Share this episode with them so they can understand what they can do to make sure their feet are strong, to make sure their feet are functioning well, and make sure that their feet are ready to run. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to us and leave us a rating and review. Not only does it help people find our podcast when they're looking for information on exercise, it also helps people find our podcast when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.
This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.